There we go. Thanks for being patient, everyone. Let's go ahead and get this show on the road. All right. So, nutrition on and off the bike. That was probably the number one question I've been asked since the beginning of Shred Strong. It's just like, hey, could you ever maybe talk about nutrition? The thing with that is there's quite a bit of information to talk about. And, I'm trying to summarize it as best as possible and as succinctly as I possibly can without being too overwhelming. So, we're going to dive in. Try to save questions for the end or raise your hand. I might be able to see you raise your hand if you do that actually through the app, and then I can go ahead and have you ask any questions. But I'll try to make everything make sense because that's kind of what I love to do, right? Okay, there we go. So I have three things that I want you to think about before we dive in. And I want you to kind of think about this. You don't have to unmute and share with the group, but I want you to think about these things as I'm talking about nutrition. So first things first, what do you eat on race day or before training? So it doesn't even have to be during races or anything like that if you're not really a racer. But what do you currently eat? And what do you like and dislike about what you currently eat? All right, so think about that. And then the other two things actually are, have you ever not eaten before a race or any training, i.e. fasted? And how did that feel for you? And everyone's story is different, and there's no wrong answer or right answer, honestly, because this is subjective. This is totally about how it felt for you, okay? And then the third thing here is, what do you think you are supposed to eat? Do you think it's just goos and gels, or do you think it's something else, all right? And then, of course, the little photo there is a buddy of mine who owns a waffle company. Actually, I don't think he does it anymore, but he's classically trained as a pastry chef. And he owns Full Tilt Waffle Company out of Fort Collins, and they're delicious waffles. So those are one of the things that I used to eat on the bike. But I'll of course talk about some things that I personally eat, as well as clients that I work one-on-one with nutrition. They enjoy eating, but ultimately, I want you to think about what you're currently eating, what you like and dislike. If you've ever done fasted training, how did that make you feel? And then what do you think you are supposed to? And I put that in quotes because, there's always that should. Everyone has a case of the shoulds, right? So what do you think that you're supposed to eat on and off the bike, but especially on the bike for fuel? If you think it's just chewy and gooey stuff, basically. My big thing that I talk about, generally with my one-on-one clients, but I do want to start making a little bit more of a stance on social media because I see it time and time again with folks who come to me, is that most athletes, if you move intentionally, you're an athlete. So just to let you know the definition of being an athlete. But most athletes are under eating, and therefore they truly are possibly underperforming. And it's really up to us, up to you, to experiment, to kind of figure out how much food you need. And that's the goal of today's chat, is to really help you kind of learn how to do this, okay? So step number one, you need to eat enough, obviously. And you probably heard like the rule of thumb by a lot of folks, unfortunately, that are on social media or elsewhere who are quote unquote, I guess, influencers, I think is the term, but they'll tout a 1,200 calorie diet, and things like that. And when I say diet, I don't mean it in a negative way. Diet is a way that you eat, because words matter, okay? So they usually tout or reinforce the idea and concept of 1,200 calorie diet. Male, female, doesn't really matter, right? Because if your goal is weight loss and to be lean year round, which I have opinions about that, I don't think that that's a healthy way of living personally. They think that you need to be about 1,200, maybe 1,500 calories. And maybe some people do. Some people might need to, especially if they're not as active. They are definitely a desk dweller, and they aren't a weekend warrior like I am, or like you are, for example. Sure, that might work for some people. But if you're intentionally moving and you're intentionally active and you're riding a bike, especially with mountain biking and gravel biking, like these are very intense sports, in and of themselves. They're, generally speaking, they're HIIT workouts, especially here in Colorado. And I know some of you folks who are in Mexico and Arizona, a lot of those trails, they're undulating trails. So they're very much like getting a high intensity interval workout, because you work on the climb, then you kind of coast on the downhill, take it easy, have fun, get your whoop whoops in, And then you're climbing again, increasing your heart rate, huffing, puffing, cussing, and then you're descending with joy across your face, hopefully. Maybe a little fear, and that's okay. But that's generally speaking an intense interval session, okay? So if you're moving intentionally, and especially if you're doing mountain biking or gravel biking or anything like that, 1,200 to 1,800 calories might not be enough. And I make the range there because again, I'm all about, n equals one. This is your story. This is your nutrition. This is trying to find out what works for you. Okay. And I can't emphasize that enough. Trust me, I wish there was a magical formula for everyone, for me to use for everyone. That way I can calculate, exactly how much food they need in a day. But I really think that there should be some joy in trying to find out what that is for you and what feels really good for you and what makes you feel amazing. Okay. Generally, okay, because I don't speak in absolutes. If there's one thing that you've learned about me so far, with working together, is I don't speak in absolutes because there are things that are very individualistic for folks. But for active females, right around 2,000 calories or more is a sweet spot for a lot of folks. The leaner you are, you might even need more food than that. Okay. Again, this is just a generalization. And then active males, about 2,000 to 3,000 calories. And when I say females and males, that is honestly, it's dependent upon, your hormones at the time. So this does apply to trans athletes and everything like that. Okay. Now, metabolic adaptation. This is not a negative thing. This is not a bad thing. Your metabolism is very intelligent. Your metabolism will adjust based on your movement and based on how active you are during the day and based on a variety of other things, such as your, female, male, how much sleep you're getting, stress, basically your output for the day in terms of physical output, but also your mental output as well. The temperature outside, that also impacts how much fuel your body needs to stay warm or to cool off. These are all types of things that make your metabolism change, okay? But that being said, and I see this time and time again with folks who come to me because they can't lose the last 10 pounds or they're having a difficult time losing any type of weight. And I'm only saying weight because that's generally speaking the top thing that folks do come to me for, outside of performance, obviously. But that being said, the reason is generally speaking because they've been dieting for so long. So their metabolism has tried to adapt at eating less food. And then subconsciously, you're actually also moving less. So you're still training probably at your previous level, but you're also moving during the day less because you're eating less. Your body's trying to conserve itself. Your body's trying to conserve some energy. So subconsciously, you are maybe walking less. You're fidgeting less. You're probably, at your desk, maybe more like this. If you're a desk person, you're just going to be a little bit more tired. So that's why the rule of thumb is try not to diet. If you are going to undereat in your calories, try not to do that more than 12 to 16 weeks at a time. If you're obese, with some obesity doctors that I work with, they usually recommend 6 months, like no more than 6 months at a time, but that's a whole other case. So just to let you know, it all depends on your current state of leanness and kind of where you're at right now. And try not to diet down, more than 2 times a year too. Okay. Because remember, a lot of us are seeking performance. We're seeking that feeling of thriving, not to sound like Kaiser Permanente, but we're seeking that thrive life, right? We want to feel like we're thriving in our life. So your metabolism, it's smart. It will adapt to your movement, right? Try to limit your dieting length and duration and how often you do it. But this is where your maintenance calories is kind of a magic length, especially if your goal isn't necessarily weight loss or anything like that. Maybe even if your goal is actually weight or fat loss, maintenance calories might be a good thing to strive for and increase up to. That way you can kind of see how your metabolism will respond and maybe you'll get the scale moving, because that's actually something that I find probably 9 times out of 10 or almost 10 times out of 10 with a lot of folks that I work with is I'm actually having to feed them a little bit more, right when they first start working with me. And then they're like, you all know that I curse, so I'm just gonna have to let it rip. But they're usually like, holy shit, I feel like a human. I'm not snapping at my children. That's a common thing that I see very often, for folks who have parents or who are parents rather. they're not snapping at their children or their significant other or, partner or what have you. They're also like less frustrated, just in general, with themselves and in life. But they also have more energy too when they do the bike rides, when they do the Shred Strong program, lifting or the programming that I'm doing for them. If it's the more one-on-one, it's crazy how just like an extra couple hundred calories on a regular basis, or maybe even more than that, depending on the person, just makes them feel a lot better. So something to think about. The maintenance calories sometimes is what you need to get to, whether your goal is fat loss, maybe give yourself a little bit of a break, give that metabolism a break, give your hormones a break. But generally speaking, maintenance calories is a great place to be almost year round, especially if you're not really looking for weight loss and you're looking for performance. Now, if you're looking to enhance performance, you might need to eat in a slight surplus, especially on days that you're biking a lot, but we'll talk about that later, okay? But ultimately, point here is you can diet too long, but you really can't spend too long on maintenance, which is kind of the good thing. So some quick signs that you might be under eating that we can kind of reflect as we talk and maybe think, oh, that might be a possibility for me. Then you can talk to your doctor, maybe get some blood work. Again, because I'm not able to diagnose anything, I really recommend going in, getting your physical, getting some blood work done, definitely getting your TSH checked, your full thyroid panel checked. Of course, getting some lipid panels checked if you do have a history of a lot of heart stuff like I do in my family history. So signs you might be under eating: poor sleep, or if you wake up a lot at night, whether you're in menopause or not, I'm perimenopausal, so it's kind of one of those things. It just kind of happens with the territory, right? If you have low energy, and especially if it's persistent low energy. If you're moody, not to blame everything on under eating, but moodiness is a possibility. If you have no or low sex drive, that's also a possibility as well. Poor performance, maybe not as many PRs, maybe just feeling like no will to lift or bike or anything like that. If you're unable to lose any extra body weight or body fat that you're trying to lose intentionally, if you have low hunger, so not really much appetite, and on the opposite end of the spectrum, which is very interesting, is you're hungry all the time. Okay, so it can actually present differently in people. So that's why I said earlier, N equals 1. You're the experiment. You're the person that kind of needs to explore if this is you or not. If you are a menstruating individual, if you have irregular or no periods at all, especially if you have no periods, please do talk to your medical doctor about that. If you're having difficulty with fertility, if you are trying to get pregnant, it could be a possibility that maybe you're not adequately fueling yourself. And then if you are experiencing any hair loss or thinning, and then of course, if you do get the blood panels and you do experience any low hormone or thyroid levels. Now, of course, hormone blood panels, little asterisks here, they're extremely expensive. Insurance, unfortunately, usually does not cover that. So do ask if you ever request a hormone profile from your doctor, regardless of what type of hormone profile it is, please know that will probably be an out-of-the-pocket expense. So it is something to kind of look at. And then do also be wary if you're getting your hormones checked at a hormone specialty clinic. Not that there's anything wrong with those, places by any means, but it's kind of like if you were to go to a surgeon to get a surgery consult. The surgeon might be conservative, that's perfectly fine, but they might be more apt to recommend surgery. Just like a hormone clinic might be more apt to recommend that you get, testosterone pellets or whatever it is that I commonly see with that, especially athletes who are high achieving athletes. They're usually low in testosterone because they're not sleeping, they're overly stressed, they're overtraining, they're under eating. All of that stuff can lead to low testosterone, male or female. So just a little caveat, try to go to a regular medical doctor or a DO. That would be optimal, okay? I'll step off my soapbox there. Okay, so don't worry, you're gonna get a copy of these slides so you can have links to all of this and everything like that. So don't stress if you miss something. But now let's talk about how you loosely calculate your basic nutritional needs, okay? Now what I find is if you go to tdeecalculator.net and also Precision Nutrition's macronutrient calculator, which we'll talk about macros in a moment, go to those two, kind of fiddle around with them, especially the activity level, because they're going to ask you what your activity level is. and see what they say. But generally, what I find is you're probably going to be somewhere in between those two calculations, okay? Because the PN, Precision Nutrition Macronutrient Calculator, is usually on the higher end. And then I find the TDE calculator is kind of on the lower end. So sometimes actually, I'll go ahead and use the TDE calculator and increase it just a little bit and go from there. But it is interesting, I think, to see how both of these calculate. But you're going to see very minor differences, generally speaking, especially if you get the activity level figured in fairly well and you're consistent between the two, okay? Now, you're going to have greater accuracy if you do have body fat percentage. The only accurate way that you can test your body fat, honestly, is during autopsy. Highly 10-10 do not recommend, okay? I don't want you to be no longer in this plane that we are living in and have to get your body fat tested. DEXA, however, a DEXA scan is fantastic, especially if you might have some bone density history in your family, some issues with that in your family. It's nice to have a nice DEXA scan once. It does use radiation, so just a little bit of a heads up. But it is kind of the gold standard, and it can be better than using calipers, those little calipers that maybe you've seen at the gym, or also like body fat scale that you're standing on. It's not really going to be very accurate because it's basically using your hydration level and your liquid level in your body to kind of judge what your body fat is, okay? Gives you a nice idea, but it's not going to be as accurate as maybe a DEXA scan. But I will say, like, having your body fat percentage and inputting it into these calculators can help. But when you figure out what the calories are that you're trying to consume, just to be aware, real big on being aware of how much to eat. Then try to experiment for a minimum 2 to 4 weeks before you make any adjustments, okay? Because it's all really about consistency more than anything, all right? Now, when you get that information on how much you're trying to eat, and it will give you kind of a calorie goal, that can bring up some stuff for some people, all right? Calories, because of the history of the diet industry here in the United States, well, really everywhere, like North America and worldwide. But I will say, generally speaking, in the West, let's say that, it's not a very positive light for the diet industry because unfortunately, again, it's that 1,200 to 1,500 calorie goal that everyone's trying to strive for, and they try to keep getting themselves smaller, smaller, and smaller. And unfortunately, they're not really optimizing their performance in the process. So people, in essence, feel like crap when they're on a diet, usually, especially depending on how you're dieting, especially if it's a crash diet, right? So please know when I'm talking about calories, I'm not talking about it in a very strict sense, okay? And I'm saying this actually as I have a bowl literally of rice and eggs next to me, because this is what I was eating as I was giving my slides a once over, with some fresh eyes and food. Food is a gift, right? The earth literally gives us this gift every day. And I think we kind of need to appreciate it. Of course, we're paying for the gift, but I'm just saying, like, we're able to source food. We're very fortunate to be able to source food for ourselves. And I think that is sometimes kind of lost in the mix. But when I'm talking about calories, please know it's just because I want to build awareness around how much you're eating, not because I want you to become obsessed about it. All right. So there's a little bit of a difference here. So just know that that's the hat that I'm wearing right now. Okay. So let's talk about macronutrients. Macros. They're basically the building blocks of what makes up your food. All right. So my bowl of literally, I have no greens in this bowl because I just need a couple of things. And I have some fat in there too, in the form of butter and goat cheese. But, this bowl generally, it's delicious because I put some salt on it too. But it has protein in the form of eggs, and it has some rice, so it's carbs, and then it has some fats in the form of butter and goat cheese, and then it has some seasoning just for fun. Generally, I probably would have added some more seasoning, but I was kind of feeling a little tired today, so I just needed some bland food, hence no greens. Normally, I would have put like half bowl of arugula in there, but I'm not feeling too well today, so I'm just kind of taking it easy. But this is serving me a purpose, all right? It's keeping me well fed, keeping me fueled, keeping me energized, even though I'm not technically feeling well. I'm not used to not feeling well. But again, food serves a purpose because I kind of know how it's built, all right? So macros, again, they're the building blocks. That's what's building my bowl over here. All right. So proteins, just to let you know, and carbs, they both have the same calories per gram. All right. So 4 calories per gram of protein. So every gram of protein is 4 calories. Every gram of carbs is 4 calories. Just to give you an idea. Now, fats, they're going to be a little bit more calorically dense, and that's because it's 9 calories per gram of fat. So that's why things can really increase heavily in terms of calorically speaking when you're consuming a little bit more fat. But fat is not the devil. We'll talk about that in a second. Last thing here, it's not really a macronutrient, but I'm just bringing awareness around it in case you do drink alcohol. Alcohol does provide, of course, no nutrients, but it is equal to about 7 calories per gram. It does include a little bit of fun if that is a thing for you, but it also can impact recovery speed in terms of muscle speed, muscle recovery speed rather. And it can also reduce your protein synthesis for your muscles. So like the way that your muscles utilize protein when you're actually consuming it. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of a heads up, it can impede that a little bit. Now, many foods, of course, do have more than one macronutrient. Now, I have my old school chart here that I literally have had since the beginning of times. I always put it in here because I think it's hilarious. Protein, I just kind of did standard categorization here. Egg whites, chicken, turkey bacon, regular bacon, of course, bison, things like that. All right, of course, vegan meat substitutes. So I know we have a lot of vegetarians and a lot of vegans in the group. And then, of course, any protein supplements. And then you have the fats off to the right, which is basically oils, dressings, butters, nuts, seeds, nut butters, all the good stuff. Egg yolks, avocado, and olives. And then carbs, you'll see, does include vegetables, although vegetables, especially if they're non-starchy vegetables, so basically a non-potato, a non-squash, a non-root vegetable, they're going to have lower carbs, right? So greens and things like that are going to have much, much lower carbs. They do have carbohydrates. But also fruits are considered a carb. So it's rice, couscous, pasta, whole grains. You can kind of see the list. Might be a little small on your screen, but you'll get the sense. Now, a lot of these can overlap, and that's totally fine. Like eggs with the yolk, that's a protein with a fat. It's actually beautiful, beautiful protein with a fat because that fatty yolk has so many nutrients in it that you can't necessarily get in some other foods, like choline and things like that. So a lot of these things can overlap. Bison, one of my favorites. I am a meat eater. I apologize. I won't talk about it extensively just in case you're vegetarian, but bison does have protein as well as fat because it's usually about 90% lean, okay? And the same thing with obviously other meat sources. Now, carbs, they don't necessarily have a ton of protein. Kale does have a little bit more protein than other greens, for example. And obviously cream of wheat or cream of rice or those cereals, especially from the 1950s and 1960s that were popular. They were popular during, even earlier than that, because during wartime, they were trying to get basically folks to get iron in their diet. So you're going to see cream of wheat, sometimes cream of rice. I don't think they do it anymore, but cream of wheat definitely is supplemented with iron because they were trying to find a way, and cereals are usually the easiest way to get the American population to increase their iron without having to spend a lot of money on protein, especially red meats. It's just a little fun fact there. But yeah, you'll see there's going to be a lot of overlap too with this Venn diagram. All right, so why are macros important? The reason I talk about it is because I just want to make you aware of what you're eating and kind of give an idea of like, oh, okay, that's considered a protein, carb, fat, because maybe you don't know, but you're probably also familiar with this too. But also this helps you kind of see what proportion of things you're eating in your diet when you do start to become aware of what you're eating, right? Now, big thing, just eating clean, there's really not a definition to that. I mean, generally speaking, circles have talked about like just trying not to eat processed foods, right? Even if you're just eating clean, you can still be overeating or undereating, especially for performance purposes. So this is when the quantity of your food really matters, Clean eating, sure, that really focuses on the quality of your food, which is fantastic. But I also really want to get folks to be dialed in on how much food they're eating too. And then again, having awareness around what you eat, it's just so important to performance. Definitely, 100%. And then also aesthetics, if that's important for you, okay? If you just want to feel comfortable or you just want to like feel maybe a little bit more confident in a certain outfit or something, I'm not going to discredit that because those are your goals. So if that is your goal, by all means, it's one of those things. I'm real big on having someone feel confident. Like if that's important for you, I am fully on board. It's generally why I love strength training because I feel like folks can feel a lot more confident through strength training, but you can also feel more confident and energized through what you're eating as well. Okay, so this is why I'm big on at least bringing awareness around what you're eating by tracking just a little bit. And again, I don't want this to be stressful. It's just again to bring awareness. So real big on knowing and not guessing. That's why earlier I talked about getting blood work, talking to your doctor, especially if you trust your doctor. If you're in the Denver area and you're looking for a medical practitioner, let me know. I do have one that I really trust. She's actually in my neighborhood. But yeah, I want you to know and don't guess. I want you to monitor things in order for you to manage it a little bit better and build that awareness after a few weeks and kind of then start to realize how your body responds to certain energy intake or food intake levels. Okay. So again, knowing how much you're eating builds awareness. Can't emphasize it enough. I really recommend just tracking how much you're eating for a few days, for 2 weeks, but it doesn't have to be 14 days. All right. Pick a couple weeks, try to include at least one weekend day, but maybe do like 2 weekdays. So like Pia, when you're at your work, that's going to be kind of a crazy time. So maybe don't track while you're at work, working with patients, things like that, but you can reflect on it, or maybe keep a little journal and just write it. But there are also apps. So do whatever feels good for you. I recommend, again, 2 weekdays and then 1 weekend day, and make it like a typical weekend day. Like don't fudge it, because again, it's all about awareness, not guilt. Screw the guilt. I just want you to be aware of what you're eating. Track for a couple of weeks, and then you can use free apps. I gave a list there of some ideas there, because again, this eliminates guessing. This is not meant to be forever. Okay. There are definitely a lot of people who track for a long time because it actually doesn't bother them. They don't have any food hangups or a negative diet history, things like that. So that's perfectly fine if you are one of those, but I am not about to force that on anyone because I don't recommend that if it makes you cringe or makes you uncomfortable. Okay. Now, something else that especially Americans are not necessarily used to is using a food scale. If you go to Europe, you stay at an Airbnb, I almost guarantee there's going to be a food scale instead of measuring cups. Probably both. There's going to be measuring cups and food scale. Because generally when they're cooking, they always usually measure things just literally right on the food scale because they don't think about it. Like they're not counting macros, technically. They're just building the recipe using the actual weight, because using the weight of the food is going to be a little bit more accurate in terms of than just measuring in a cup, if that makes sense. However, totally optional. But this is just, again, to bring awareness around that peanut butter serving, for example. Like I still remember years ago when I learned like what a true peanut butter serving is, because I love peanut butter. Love peanut butter. I could just put it all over. But when I learned like how much peanut butter I was actually using, which was, I think, like, I can't remember, but it was probably close to like 2 to 3 servings. Not even kidding. Because that's how much peanut butter I love on my PBJ sandwiches. Again, it just brought awareness. No guilt, but it brought awareness where I was like, oh, okay. All right. Now I know. Now I know how much peanut butter to actually kind of put to be a little bit more friendly with my goals, especially if I wanted to increase my carbs and things like that for performance. So just something to kind of keep in mind. So what I recommend, because tracking can be overwhelming. It can make you want to throw your phone out the window, especially at first. So I want you to make it the easiest way possible. And just track your protein at first, because that is the number one thing that I see folks are likely under eating, especially if they're more of the vegan or vegetarian variety, right? There's nothing wrong with those eating styles. I was a vegetarian for years. I dabbled a little bit in veganism actually recently. And it's one of those things like in order to eat a little bit of a higher protein diet with those types of eating, that lifestyle choice, you do have to increase your carbs and possibly your fats a little bit more to really get your protein a little bit higher. So try to aim for just tracking your protein, tracking your main protein sources. So like meats, supplements, beans, things like that, right? Now, as you get comfortable with tracking protein, for like a week or two, then start to build in carbs and fats. And by all means, use the measuring cups. If that's easier for you to to use a measuring cup, start weighing it out, it's fine. Just kind of track it and see what it looks like. All right. The thing with protein, however, is I want you to aim for about 73-ish, usually 70% at a minimum, to 110% of your body weight in pounds, right? So not in kilograms, but take your body weight in pounds and then multiply it by 73 to 110%. Usually I recommend at least 70% because that's what research lately has shown in the last few years is kind of an ideal, especially if you're lifting weights and especially if you're looking for performance needs and adequate recovery, all right? Because remember, we're looking for performance. In order for you to perform well, you have to recover well, all right? Now, if you're a little bit older or as you age, I'm 42, you might need a little bit more protein. Now, anecdotally, what I've noticed is I'm short, 5'2". I eat more protein than probably most people, but that's just what I've discovered over the years. Works well for me, and it doesn't, impact my kidneys or anything like that. So it's one of those things. Increase it slightly. Don't overnight aim for 73%. Like if you're eating maybe like, I would say most commonly, most clients that come to me are eating about 70 to 75 grams of protein per day. And they're hungry all the time. So I don't automatically say, you got to go up to 150 grams of protein, if they're like 175 pounds or something like that. No, I would never do that because that's just asking for a gastric dynamic event that you might not enjoy because protein takes more calories for you to burn, for you to kind of consume and chew and all this other stuff. So incrementally try to maybe get to like 80 grams, and try to get to 100 grams of protein. Now, if you are a vegan or vegetarian, try to get a minimum of 100 grams of protein per day. That's usually a good minimum. And try not to overdo the supplements, just because we want you to eat some real food. We want you to eat some food that you chew. But slowly increase your protein and kind of get to that point where you're comfortable. And then, of course, some options here. I list them there that we kind of have some ideas. Carbs and fats, they're not the enemies. They're obviously the two other main building blocks of meals and food and calories. So carbs, just to let you know, they're best fuel for energy and, support your recovery too. And again, like I said earlier, especially with high intensity sports like mountain biking. Now, carbs are needed also for your thyroid and your GI to function properly because hello, fiber, that helps with regularity and helps with, poop schedules. Thyroid, insulin and carbs, they stimulate the T4 thyroid hormone, that whole conversion to the active T3, okay? Carbs, so a lot of folks try to lose weight and they will slash their carbs. And these are even individuals with Hashimoto's and things like that. And unfortunately, that is not doing that. That's doing them a disservice. So they're on Synthroid or they're on other thyroid medications. And unfortunately, their body is almost like fighting themselves, so keep in mind, carbs are necessary for your hormones to function properly. It does include thyroid, right? Same thing with fats. If you're having low libido and you're eating a low fat diet, try to increase your fats. If you're not having a regular period, if you are a menstruating individual, try to increase your fats, because those are definitely needed for hormonal regulation and also to absorb vitamins. So there's fat soluble vitamins that you're eating that are needed. And do keep in mind, low fat diets, they definitely can disrupt sleep and your performance, of course, like your sex drive, like I said. All right, so let's dive into what the hell to eat. This is the fun part, all right? So you kind of learn the nuts and bolts. It's probably like drinking from a fire hose, and I'm sorry, but I wanted to give you all that information in a very condensed, that's a very, very condensed format. So now we're going to talk about before your training and before any races, what you should consider, for fuel. So the first thing you need to consider is the timing of your meals. So the larger meal before your training should be about 2 to 3 hours before your actual training or your race. Then you should have, and that should be a balanced meal, by the way, that larger meal should be a balanced protein, carbs, and fats, just a nice balanced meal. Like if you're looking at your plate, like a little pie chart, you're going to have your protein as a quarter, and you're going to have your carbs as a quarter, and then your fats are going to be like a sliver, actually. So you're going to have like a good, dish full of maybe vegetables on there. You're going to have like a palm size of protein on there. And then you're going to have like a cupped hand or two of carbs on there, and then a couple of thumbs or a thumb of fat, just to give you an idea. And I didn't necessarily want to talk hand portions in this presentation, but it kind of gives you a little bit of a visualization while I'm talking about this, right? And just to let you know, I can quickly talk about hand portions, like a palm, just a palm, not your fingers, not your thumb, palm thickness kind of size. It's going to be about 3 to 4 ounces of cooked meat, or if you're a vegetarian, maybe about a cup or so, 3/4 of a cup. Beans, a couple of eggs. It's going to be equivalent to a couple of eggs, maybe a little bit of egg whites. It's going to be equivalent to like almost a cup of Greek yogurt. I'm trying to think of other like protein correlations here if you're not a meat eater. But if you're a meat eater, it's going to be about 3 to 4 ounces of cooked meat. Okay. And that's going to be roughly 20, maybe 25 grams of protein. It's a serving. So just to let you know, that's like a typical serving. It's about 20, 25 grams of protein. Same thing with carbs. Again, 20, 25 grams of carbs, because remember, calorically, they're the same, all right? Like what we talked about earlier, every gram has 4 calories, right? So carbs, it's going to be about, like a medium tuber or, medium potato or like a medium fruit, like a medium banana. What's this medium? I have no idea. Like it's about like 100 grams, generally speaking. And then I'm trying to think of other ideas, like 3/4 of a cup, maybe of rice or quinoa. That's kind of a little bit of protein, but just give you some visual ideas. When it comes to fats, you're looking at about an ounce of cheese. If you're doing dairy, I'm like doing thumbs up here, like 70 style. But an ounce of cheese, a serving of dressing, a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil, depending on what's on the nutrition label. So just kind of check that out. But generally, it's going to be about 10, maybe to 20 grams of fats. Ideally, closer to probably 20 grams of fats. It's going to be like a serving size, okay? So just to give you an idea there, hopefully that helps. Whenever I say like a serving of protein, I'm generally talking about maybe 25 grams at a minimum. If you're a larger individual, taller than I am, larger than I am, you might need upwards of 2 servings. And, again, it's all based on you and experimenting and exploring, right? Now, before your races and before your training, you might want to have a smaller meal shortly beforehand, like 45 to 60 minutes. And again, this is going to be a little bit more of a carb based meal, which we'll talk about in a minute on another slide, but this is just the timing. So please know there's a timing consideration. Now, if you work out fasted first thing in the morning, that's going to be different for you because maybe that's what you just enjoy. There's no real fat loss secrets. A lot of studies have shown that there's actually no optimization to actually training fasted. But if you prefer to train fasted, by all means do, but you just might notice your performance kind of wane a little bit. So just a heads up. Now, if you're training fasted in the morning, what you're going to want to do is maybe apply some of this that you're going to be learning about here in the next couple slides to your evening meal or your last meal or snack the night before your training. That way you're feeling good and you're feeling nice and fueled for that training in the morning. Ultimately, this depends on your digestion and your nerves. Gosh, I don't have my cursor, but I'm just letting you know it depends on your digestion and especially your nerves before a race. Second thing you need to consider, duration and conditions. How long is the race? How long is your training? What time of the day is it? Like for me, I'm a morning person. I'm also an evening person, which is kind of tragic, but morning person, hey, I like doing it. I also love working out in the afternoons too, like right around lunchtime. As the afternoons wane, my energy tends to go down a little bit, I'm getting ready for bed because I've been up since 5 a.m. So it's kind of one of those situations where you have to consider duration, how long, distance, also weather. If it's extremely cold outside, your body is using a lot more energy to stay warm. Okay, so give yourself a break, especially if you are noticing that maybe your hunger has increased a little bit, if you're doing some outdoor riding like fat biking or skiing or snowboarding and all that stuff. And then think about, hey, what the hell do you want to eat? Which we'll talk about, right? So first things first, real quick recap. I already talked about macronutrients, but I want you to know kind of what they do and how food creates energy and health. So talked about carbs, proteins, fats. Also you talk about vitamins, minerals, fiber, and water. So carbs, of course, they give you energy, they create energy. They're also a primary fuel for muscles. We store stuff, glycogen, in our liver and in our muscles. And that's a favorite energy source for the body to use, especially for high intensity work. Protein promotes, of course, muscle growth overall and recovery. And it's also needed for almost every cellular function in the human body. So just something to think about. That's why it's so important. That's why there's been so many studies, especially recently. The funding for studies has really increased for a lot of my friends that work at academia in research. A lot of that protein research has increased substantially lately because we're starting to notice that this is a gap, especially in the recommended daily allowances, the RDA. They're a little outdated, unfortunately. So we're trying to figure out what to do from a public health perspective. So just to let you know, I get really excited about protein. Fats, they transport nutrients. They're needed. They're lipids. They also are a great slow secondary energy source. When you start to tap all your carbs, your body's going to start to go towards your fats, especially if you're doing more of an endurance type of race or an endurance type of run or anything like that. I.e. Leadville, Stacy, you know what it's all about. So vitamins and minerals, they help with all of your bodily functions and processes. You need these, all right? So like what I'm eating right now is not necessarily nutrient dense because again, it's white rice. I don't even eat brown rice because I actually don't tolerate brown rice. So I eat white rice and eggs, you know, I get the basic nutrients, but I don't have a ton of vitamins in here. I do have some sodium and I do have some potassium in here through the eggs and things like that, but I need a bland food, you know? So this I know is not dense necessarily in vitamins and minerals, but I do also supplement with some things like especially magnesium and things like that, but they're really necessary, you know, so if you are starting to experience muscle cramps or things like that, start to look at maybe your intake of, you know, potassium and sodium as well, especially as an athlete. Fiber, it is necessary. It is so necessary. Helps aid in digestion and of course promotes gut health, you know, so just your gut flora, which I know a lot of research is also talking about lately on how that connects with your mental health and things like that. And then last but not least, water, you know, of course provides hydration and it's necessary. You need it. Without it, you're going to die. You have to hydrate or die, unfortunately, like the Camelback ad says. So thinking about these things, you know, and how these components make energy and provide health and longevity for you. Let's get into the speed of energy. All right. So before your workout, before your training, and before your races, the type of fuel is a consideration. Okay. So like I talked a couple slides ago about item number 3, what to eat. This is going to help you. Right. So what to eat, it depends on the speed of energy that you need. Right. So think about what you're going to do. Think about the workout in front of you or the training ride or what have you. So simple carbs, that's going to provide you the fastest form of energy. These are sweeter or white foods. So I have white rice in here because I need a little pick me up this afternoon. And I don't drink caffeine. So there you go. But sweeter or white foods, higher sugar foods, pasta, baked goods, delicious baked goods, croissant, anyone that also has fat. But then also sports food and gels generally are going to be more carb heavy, especially simpler carbs. So you might experience some gut discomfort, especially if you're consuming a lot of gels or chews or goos. And that's because of just the type of sugar that is in them. And you're not really able to break them down effectively because you're chugging them so quickly, like literally, especially those squeezy goo things, you know what I'm talking about? If you're just chugging it so quickly, you're not really like swishing it around your mouth or anything like that. You're just down in it, down the hatch. That's going to hit your stomach and it's basically it's not going to be a pretty picture for a lot of folks, not everyone, but for a lot of folks. I know I have experienced it before. I don't experience it consistently though. So you might not also experience it all the time, all right? Just something to be aware of. And the reason is because you're drinking it, same thing with sports drinks, you're drinking it so quickly and you're, you know, swallowing it so quickly that you're not able to actually use an amylase that's in your saliva because digestion starts here when we're, you know, I forget the scientific word, but when we chew in your food, it starts there and it releases saliva and that helps break down the food a little bit here, especially high sugar foods, helps break down the food here in your mouth. And that is on purpose. So that way, when it hits your gut, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to do much more digestion. Of course, it does do bulk of your digestion, but it starts in your mouth. So when you're doing gels and sports drinks, try to maybe swish it around your mouth a little bit or chew, especially the gels, chew it in your mouth a little bit I've even had clients successfully chew on the. I don't have a goo pack because I don't actually eat them anymore, but they'll actually chew. So they'll squeeze and they'll hold the goo in their mouth while they breathe through their nose, and they'll chew the tip of the goo packet just to kind of get like the activity going if they need something, or if they're having a hard time to just chewing on the gel in their mouth because it's such an automatic function to want to swallow it. It's just a little tip. Doesn't work for everyone because some people will gag if they want to chew on the sports gel pack, but try not to skip the mouth. Okay. Second thing, so simple carbs, fastest form of fuel. Complex carbs, it's still a fast form of fuel, but it's going to be a little bit slower because there are going to be some fiber in there because fruits, vegetables, whole grains, all of that, brown rice has some more fiber. Potatoes, freaking love potatoes. Take a note from the Germans and a lot of the Europeans. They literally boil potatoes, salt them, and they'll eat them. Sometimes they'll sprinkle Parmesan cheese on them or something, but they'll eat them on like just like that. Now protein's a slower form. It's going to slow down digestion a little bit. So any meats, things like that, like we talked about, that's protein. That'll be even slower for digestion. So oils, things like that we talked about earlier. Anything with high fiber, all right? If you're eating a high fiber complex carb, if you're eating beans before you're training, oh, good Lord. First of all, pray for you. But the fiber is going to be the slowest to digest and to absorb, right? So just some tips here. Now, example meals, given kind of what I talked about in the earlier slide, whole grain toast with eggs. Could also be a sourdough bread toast, whatever toast you like. I'm a big sourdough fan, but I put whole grain in there because I know a lot of people could probably benefit from more fiber, all right? Whole grain toast with some eggs or maybe a nut butter, because again, you choose your favorite fat or protein. I'm not going to tell you what to eat. I mean, I'll give you ideas, but I'm not going to tell you what to eat because I want you to explore, I want you to experiment. Second thing, rice bowl with eggs, literally. Forgot to put this in here. Yeah, so rice bowl with eggs, no greens. I don't really recommend a ton of greens, beforehand, but this is for your main meal, before you actually go out and eat, before you go out and you have like that smaller meal. Okay, this is your main meal. It should be balanced. You can, if you want to, with that rice bowl with eggs, add some greens, add some arugula, or add some spinach, saute it with the eggs, whatever you want. My favorite, this is what I eat every morning. Stacey can vouch. I'm trying to think of other people that have seen me eat breakfast in the group. Power Pocket pancakes. My nickname is Power Pancake. Oh my God, I can't even think right now. It's Pocket Pancake. And the reason for that is because I always, on probably every bike ride, especially if it's a morning bike ride, a weekend ride, I'll always have an extra set of pancakes in my pocket. They're wrapped, but they're Kodiak Cakes, Power Cakes mix. Not that I think that anything that has protein added is automatically healthy. No, I just like Kodiak Cakes because they use whole grains and they really increase the hell out of my fiber, which is great because if you haven't learned yet, I come from a family with some really shitty genes. Okay, so I've got some heart issues, cardiac issues, a lot of early heart attacks in my family, colon cancer at a young age. So guess what I need to do in the next couple of years? Get my colonoscopy. But that's why I emphasize fiber so much, is because I see how beneficial it can be, from a scientific standpoint for a lot of folks in our health and our longevity. Okay, so I tend to really gravitate towards Kodiak Cakes. They're an American company based out of Utah. They're very delicious. So they're not that far from here, from Colorado, but I get them shipped here for me literally every 4 weeks. I love them. And again, it's not because it has protein added to it. It's actually because of the fiber. So don't think that anything that has protein added is automatically healthy. But this is what I use. So Kodiak Cakes, Power Cakes mix. I literally mix it with some water. I mix it with a handful of blueberries, a couple tablespoons of some mini dark chocolate chips because chocolate, why not? And then on the side, I usually have 1 to 2 eggs plus some greens, scramble them up, or I do an egg bake, which has a bunch of vegetables in it. It also has a little bit of ham. If you're vegetarian, obviously you can leave the ham out and just add your favorite vegetables, maybe some peppers. But our big thing is like spinach, onions, and sometimes we used to do peppers, but not anymore. But yeah, we'll add all that, make an egg bake, and that egg bake lasts us all weekend. In fact, I think I hear Erin making it right now. And if you want more protein, just add a little more egg whites. Not a big deal. And again, eggs are not the devil, but But yeah, that's just an example of kind of what to eat as a balanced meal. Now, right before your training and your races, I don't recommend too much caffeine. A little bit of caffeine is fine, but don't have a pot of coffee before your race, because you can be having the trots. And then especially high fat foods, high sugar foods. I don't advocate skipping any type of meals. Don't eat on the run. Try to chew your food thoroughly and try to drink before you get thirsty. So don't wait until you're thirsty to drink. Before you ride, before you race, and even on the bike and on the race, during the race. Now, the reason I said high sugar foods is not because I think sugar is the devil. Oh, no. It's because it can give you a nice boost of energy, but then it can leave you pretty flat. So I wouldn't recommend starting off with goo or anything like that. Like, make sure that you have things that are like, might have some sugar and carbs with it, but it's going to have something else. So we'll talk about that in a second. Actually, oh my gosh, I think I might have deleted that slide. I'll talk about it now. So before the meal or before your race, before your training, again, about 45 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on your digestion. Some people can do 30 minutes. Have something that does have maybe a little bit of sugar, maybe some honey and things like that. But it also is going to be a little bit more carb centric. So it's a simpler meal. For me, you're all probably going to laugh, but I'm a big fan of like Cascadian Farms, just like a handful, like a maybe 3/4 cup of cereal. Like, not even kidding. Because again, I eat fiber and I eat greens and all my other meals, but I'm training for performance and any type of sports, registered dietitian and things like that, they're really going to advocate for this because you're eating intentionally. It's not necessarily going to be something that you're eating in every meal. You're eating intentionally for performance. You really want to optimize that carb intake for more of a quicker, again, the speed of the food. You want that speed of the food to match what you're going to be doing. So if you're getting ready to go for a mountain bike ride, have a little bit of cereal or have something with some honey, maybe a little bit of Greek yogurt with honey or fruit. Fruit does take a little bit longer, to kind of break down because of fructose and things like that. There's like an extra few steps in there to use the sugar in the fruit, but it's still starchy carb, Again, explore, experiment, find what works for you, okay? But I just don't recommend, you're never going to want to have a spoonful of sugar anyways, because a spoonful of sugar is awful, but just try to be mindful of the sugar, having high sugar foods like right beforehand, because it can give you that surge and then kind of make you a little flat. While you're training and racing on and off the bike, it doesn't really matter. Again, consider intensity of what you're doing, the duration, and again, the conditions. Can't emphasize that enough. If it's cold, you're going to need a little bit more fuel because you're trying to stay warm. So fuel faster and sooner than you think. So what I usually recommend is every 45 to 90 minutes. I think 90 minutes might be even too long, but that's usually ideal for people who don't like the idea or the feeling of chewing while they're riding, or they're having a hard time doing it because they're working so hard and you don't want to choke on your food while you're racing. So again, play with that number during your training and start with just consuming about 100 to 150 calories an extra per hour. All right, just start with that as a snack, especially if you don't snack right now. You might, however, need about 300 to 400 calories per hour because we want to aim to replace 50% of how much you're burning, how much your wearable might tell you you're burning per hour. Take about half that, and that's ultimately what you're burning per hour. Try to ingest half that, but don't start with that. So if you're burning like 800 calories an hour, which is crazy, but it's possible, especially if you're really hammering up a climb. It's really intense, it's very hot, or it's very cold. You can imagine, right? Your calories increase, right? Calorie burn increases rather. So I wouldn't start with maybe having a 400 calorie snack right out of the gate. Instead, just ease into it. Maybe start with 150 to 200 calorie snack. See how you do, because you might never know. Like, it might upset your stomach, because again, you want to experiment with digestion and how much you tolerate and what you tolerate. All right. For me, generally, I'll eat my pocket pancakes. So for my morning ride, I'll have my breakfast beforehand, and then I'll have my pocket pancakes usually about an hour into the ride. Or if it's a short ride, only an hour and a half, great, I'll eat it out afterwards in the parking lot. So just to give you an idea, and that's maybe about 150 calories to 200 calories, because I do usually also add some maple syrup to it if it's a more intense ride. Just to let you know, because again, sports nutrition. Sports nutrition is different. It's going to be different than regular nutrition because you're trying to ingest calories for a purpose, right? That doesn't include weight loss or anything like that. Now, again, some ideas to think about on what to eat while you're training or racing. If you're more high intensity, then you're going to want to do simpler carbs because your body is going through the glycogen stores in your liver and your muscles so quickly that you're going to want to replace that. So you're going to want something that's more simple. So again, the sweeter, whiter, and everything like that a few slides ago, right? A little bit more aerobic, kind of zone 2, low intensity. You're just pedaling, you're just chilling. Your heart rate's in that happy heart rate space, which is usually about roughly, if you take 180 minus 20, that's going to be, well, technically, sometimes it's actually 40. I think is the general equation that we'll use. It's like take 180 minus 40, like for me, so that's about 140. It's really 140 for everyone. 140 beats per minute is kind of a happy place, for a lot of people. Like you can still converse to someone that's next to you without, talking like you're losing your mind. Your face probably isn't red at that point either. You're probably still feeling pretty good, but you're able to converse basically. When you start to climb, that's generally when your heart rate goes up to 150 to 100, maybe even up to 200 depending on your age. But just to give you an idea, like aerobic is going to be 140 beats per minute or less, generally speaking, for most people. Right. This is when you can have more complex carbs. So you can have some fiber, whole grains rather. There's going to be a little bit of fiber in there, or you can have some simpler carbs plus a protein or fat, which is going to be less fiber if the complex carbs bothers you. Because again, I want you to experiment because sometimes people don't tolerate fibrous foods on the bike. They don't maybe need the whole grain bread. They're going to want the sourdough or the white bread. These things are not bad because you're not eating these things in every meal. So I think that's where the mentality kind of needs to shift. You're eating for a purpose, right? The biggest thing is just make it easy to eat. So maybe unwrap the stuff and put it in your jersey pocket if you can, or go ahead and open the package before you get on the bike. That way the package is already open and it's just sitting in your pocket. And then that way you can kind of reach back and grab it and you're not littering as much, which is another bonus, right? Big thing here is don't drink all of your calories, because if you're drinking all of your calories, that's when you can increase gastric upset. You can also burn it a little bit more quickly. You want to have some stuff to kind of masticate's the word. You want some stuff to chew. Excuse me. Feeling those eggs and the rice. So after working out, after your race nutrition, biggest goal is going to be recovery, hands down, bar none. We want you to basically think about you being able to show up for your next training or your next race, or just show up to your life after your race or your training. We want you to feel good. So consider the timing of the last meal that you ate before your training or race, because that, if you're fasted, if it's early in the morning, you didn't eat anything because it's just your training, you're lifting in your jam or whatever, going for a little interval session on the bike in the Shred Strong program. If you're fasting during that, then you're going to want to eat pretty soon after your training if you can. Okay. Now, if you did eat beforehand, you have a little bit more of a window. There's no like 30-minute magic window or anything like that for most people. Generally, it's about an hour or so if you've already eaten before your training. The biggest thing to consider are carbs and protein. Carbs are going to be important because we want to replace the glycogen stores that you just used up in your training and on your race. And what's cool is your body is pretty much ready to take this stuff in and absorb it and utilize it. So it's nice to kind of have some carbs after a workout or a training session. And then of course, protein, because again, remember, protein really helps with recovery and helps your muscles kind of heal up a little bit. Some things to consider, again, like earlier, the type of food matters regarding the speed of what you did. So like in this slide, anaerobic, aerobic, things like that, you want to consider that. Oops, oh my God, hold on a minute. Losing my mind here. There we go. I must have accidentally skipped. I want to talk about energy deficits. We'll talk about that. The biggest thing here with nutrition is REDs. So I actually have not yet done a podcast episode on this, but it's an important thing. This has to do with that earlier slide when I talked about like, hey, are you maybe not eating enough? Not having a period if you're a menstruating individual, or kind of a weird cycle, or maybe you're skipping periods. You're not necessarily perimenopausal or menopausal. these are things to consider. If you're having issues with sleeping, these are things to talk about with your doctor. Um, you know, because there is such thing as an energy deficit that is going to be like kind of like a residual energy deficit. It just compounds and compounds and compounds, and it can show up a lot of times. One thing I did want to talk about is if you are on hormonal birth control, I will never speak negatively about hormonal birth control, but if you are on hormonal birth control, it is something to think about, because especially if you're on birth control that doesn't give you a period and you're not having a period, and you're like, oh, I'm fine, I'm on this birth control. I've had friends, not even clients, but I've had friends experience this who are also coaches. And they got the blood panel, went to the doctor and everything like that. And everything was fine, but man, they were sleeping like shit. They were moody, they were stressed out. What was the other thing that she talked about? Energy was absolutely tanked. Like, had no energy to lift. She had no energy to run. She was a big runner. She's one of my friends who's a real big runner. And she talked about this on social media recently. Her name's Allison. But she talked about how like doctors couldn't figure it out. And then she realized, oh, I have REDS, REDS, and it's basically an energy deficit. And it's very common, especially with, female athletes. It's just something to be aware of. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I just want you to be aware of, because not eating enough can definitely cause shenanigans in your body. But like earlier, the type of the food matters regarding the speed of the energy source in your digestion. So simple all the way to fiber, so fastest to slowest. So ultimately, after your training or races, think about carbs, prep, think about you wanting to prep for your next training session and your recovery. Like I said earlier, I cannot emphasize this enough. I put it in here twice on purpose. I'm sorry. I know I'm beating this to death, but it's so important for me. All right. And I want you to think about snacks, think about maybe 4 parts carbs to 1 part protein, so maybe you're going to have like a couple servings of carbs and 1 serving of protein. So again, 50 grams of carbs, roughly 25 grams of protein, roughly, or more. I've been known to take more than that after intense rides and races. And this again helps stimulate insulin, which helps with glucose transform into muscle glycogen and blah, blah, blah. Ultimately, just helps you feel better, and ready for your next training, right? I just wanted to put it in there. That way, in case you all nerd, because I know everyone learns differently, in case you nerd out on like the processes and stuff, you have something in there and you kind of understand what's happening, okay? Starting to lose my voice a little bit. Again, I wasn't feeling too good earlier today. So after workouts, you're going to want a simpler carb, maybe even a complex carb, plus a little bit of protein. And here's some examples: whole grain crackers with cheese and grapes, raisin bread with banana, because the raisins have a little bit more sugar in them, PBJ sandwiches with my favorite portion of peanut butter, cut into fourths. And these are things that I'm saying cutting them up and making them smaller because it's easier to ingest. Also, it's not listed here. Smoothies. If you're having a hard time consuming food afterwards, have a smoothie. Have a shake ready to go. Maybe have a bottle of water in your car ready to go with like a little shaker bottle. You can have some fresh water, or milk, or whatever it is for you. Depending on your tolerance levels. But here's some snack ideas. For just afterwards. That way you can have things that are easy to grab. Real big on oranges with maybe some cookies, because again, that's adding some fiber to it. Pita and hummus, maybe even some deli meat if you're a meat eater. There's a variety of things, but hopefully this kind of gives you a little bit of an idea if you need a snack right away and you're able to eat. If not, smoothies and shakes will be good. So my to not do list and a to-do list. We're going to talk about that next. We're almost done. Thanks for sticking with me, everyone. I knew that this was going to be a lot to cover, but hopefully this is really helpful. So to not do list, especially on race or event day. Don't experiment on those days. This is what training is for. Try not to load up on only fiber stuff, like I said earlier, like beans. And imagine eating beans and coffee. Does that sound like a good idea? You're going to be like a fart fest. Your farts will be helping you up the hill. I have no shame in talking about farts and poop, just FYI. Avoid fat and fiber stomach bombs. So things that are really high fiber and fat, like I eat breakfast burritos. I'm huge with breakfast burritos. Maybe don't shove it full of black beans. Maybe not a good idea, especially for high intensity event. Don't eat anything. Don't skip meals is what I'm trying to say. Like, this is the to not do list, right? don't eat anything or minimally. Like even if you're having a little bit of a nervous stomach, goodness gracious, at least have a smoothie or a shake or something. Or like what tonight, like my rice and eggs. Don't drink anything. So like don't have any water in the morning. No, you're definitely gonna want to have water in the morning. And don't drink all of your calories. Okay. And then don't only depend on gels, blocks, or aid stations. Definitely don't depend on aid stations because aid stations can run out of food. Okay. Always have a little backup plan. To-do list. It's the opposite of everything I just talked about. So experiment before your training or your race day. During trainings, experiment with the timing and what you're eating and variety of snacks and how much. Always eat a larger meal. Again, 2 to 3 hours before your race. Eat a smaller, simpler carb meal about 60 to 90 minutes before race. Cereals, things like that, whatever works for you. Okay, maybe some fruit. Hydrate, of course. Have about 16 to 24 ounces of water. And then also have some electrolytes too. You want to at least have that about every hour or so. Depends on your sweat level and things like that, and how hard you're breathing and all that. Also, eat every 45 to 90 minutes on the bike. This is a good recap of everything we talked about. And then stay ahead of that energy deficit. Don't fool yourself. Don't be like, I'm not hungry. We've all been there. I know I've been there. I'm not hungry. And then you're hitting the wall. You don't want to do that, especially on race day. But this also applies to longer training days or just a training day, like a ride day with your friends. Okay, so use these tips. Eat for your day. Can't emphasize that enough. Think about what you've already done, and then think about what you're going to do the rest of the day. Yours truly. All right. If you have any questions, I'm here. You can unmute. I'm wrapped up here. I drink a sip of water because I have a 1-900 voice going right now. But yeah, unmute, ask away, fire your questions. I probably won't be able to answer any like science level questions off the top of my head, especially for me, maybe not feeling 100% right now, but I will surely try. So yeah, feel free. What questions do you all have for me? Just probably mute while I'm drinking.
I'll go first since no one's asking any questions.
Fire, Amy.
So one thing that I've struggled with, and I don't know if I've always had this problem, but whenever I try to eat a higher protein meal to get more protein, I have a lot of trouble digesting it. So I have IBS and a bunch of intolerances, and if I eat too much protein, it's like putting a cork in things.
Yeah.
To put it bluntly.
Yeah.
Would you recommend that I just break it up into more meals? I mean, I used to think it was specific proteins, so I also am a vegan and I pretty much don't eat any gluten meat because that seemed to cause that the worst. But I don't know if I should be dividing it into more smaller meals. But anytime I try to load up on protein, it seems to not go very well for me.
Yeah, especially with IBS, and again, I'm not a registered dietitian, so I cannot claim to give maybe the best advice, but I can certainly, from a health coach perspective, just because I do actually have a fair amount of clients who come to me because they're working with their RD, and so they come to me and we kind of are like a tag team because I'm more of a habits developer than like an RD, for example. But generally speaking, the first thing, and it's going to sound kind of stupid, kind of silly, Amy, but make sure that you're chewing it up really well. So just sample this the next meal that you have and just see how many chews you can get into a bite and try to aim for about 20 chews, which is a lot because you're probably going to notice that around chew 5 to 10, you might want to automatically start to swallow because it's just what you're used to. So just play around with that first. So chew it up a little bit more because you want to basically be your friend, your GI's friend, all right, especially with IBS and things like that. And then the other thing is, smaller portions, especially dependent upon you said you're vegan or a vegetarian. You said you're a vegan, right?
Vegan, yeah.
I had hiccups. Sorry, I had hiccups. I need to hold my breath for a second. With vegan meats, you want to be a little bit more careful because, and you said you had more of a gluten sensitivity with some of the vegan options, right?
Not a sensitivity in the same way that most people have with gluten. I think I just struggle to digest it. Like it feels like it gives me indigestion. Basically, it feels like I ate rocks or something. And I think it's just kind of a density thing where it's just like a big clump of protein.
Yeah, it's so amazing, right? But yeah, just try to maybe do some smaller portions that might be beneficial. It's always worth a shot. But I will say, like, a higher protein diet isn't necessarily going to be for everyone, you know. For you though, because you are so active, you know, just trying to find ways that you can get it in there. I do have a source. I don't have it up right now. Um, but I have a source that I might be able to share with you from an RD that I usually refer folks to. Let me stop sharing my screen and I can actually see, hopefully. Hold on. Let's see here. There we go. Ah, now I can see you. Or I can't see you, I can see me, unfortunately. But it's one of those situations where, you know, try to break it up, try to chew it up more. It might be as simple as that. It could be worth just trying, you know, and just kind of seeing where it is. Do you know about how much protein you are consuming?
I haven't been counting, but I tried to estimate, and I'm probably much closer to like 70 grams a day than the 100 plus that I should be getting.
Yeah. And again, try not to have a case of the shits, because, you know, it's kind of more of a matter of like, let's not maybe try to go, you know, from 60 or 70 grams on up to 100, because that might not be what's good for you, you know, because you never want to have gastric upset, because man, that is just, it's unpleasant. It's so unpleasant, and it can really take a lot of energy. So my recommendation is usually just to see what works for you, see what works best. Also make sure hydration is as good as it can be. Don't drink gallons of water because you can overhydrate, but try to drink, you know, at least 50% of your body weight in pounds. Try to drink about 50% of that in ounces of water, just to give you a nice starting point, making sure that you're hydrated, because that can definitely impact digestion too. So something to think about, because you want your body to not fight itself. So ultimately chewing your food a little bit more, maybe a little bit more servings, and then also just optimizing hydration as best as you can would be really important to kind of look at. So I don't know if that helps at all, Amy, but definitely don't force the protein. But it is something to kind of think about. But if I find that resource, I'll send it to you. I'll email it to you. But it's nice,
Okay.
I can't even remember what she, because I found it a few years ago. I hope I still have it on my laptop. But yeah, it's a resource on, like, for folks who do have IBS or might have digestive hurdles with protein, and they're more plant centric in terms of eating, so plant-based eater, and they're just trying to find ways to kind of make it optimal for them. So hopefully I'll find it and then give it to you.
Yeah,
And I work
I'd
with so many I
appreciate
work
that.
with so many RDs. I can't remember which RD made that one, so I'll have to find it. I will find it. Where there's a will, there's a way. Pia, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, do you have any tips or strategies for how I should I hate eating when I'm doing physical activity. I hate it.
Yeah.
Biking, it doesn't matter. Like, I love eating, but not when I'm doing a thing. I am eating right now, noodles.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
but I just really, really hate eating when I'm doing an activity, and how should I train my brain to consider differently?
Yeah. No, I totally feel you on this, because I'm actually the same way. So I can only eat, I sound like a 5-year-old when I say this, but I can only eat certain textures sometimes, especially if it's hot out. So I notice temperature really impacts me a lot. So during the summer, like, eating certain things makes me, I don't want to sound disgusting because you're eating, and I apologize, Pia, but
Oh, I will not be
makes me
grossed out.
nauseous. Okay, good. Okay, good. But it makes me nauseous, and it makes me just kind of not, it makes me not in a good place. So for me, like, I've had to mix up things. So I don't actually eat usually one thing. So I'll start with my pancakes, because I will eat pancakes. And those are usually a little bit softer, because again, I put whole blueberries in there, and chocolate chips. So I found what works for me, and it kind of softens. So the softness of the pancakes is actually good for me. Then as things get a little bit more progressive, I'll have like those scratch gummies, you know, from Scratch in Boulder. I'll have those to mix it up, and they're a little bit higher in sugar and they taste pretty good. However, they also get weird when it's warm out. So that's a weird warm thing because to me, it's a feeling in my mouth that impacts if I can eat it or not. So when I'm unable to do the scratch chews, then I'm usually doing a stroop waffle. So I try to have I usually have about 5 or 6 snacks to choose from, but it's a matter of mixing up what texture might feel good and what might be more appealing. Now, if you don't even like the act of chewing, is it just the act of chewing period for you, Pia?
It's a combination of things. I think it's more of a inconvenience is like a little bit on top, and it's really silly, but like I don't want to open this thing and chew this thing and like swallow this thing, and now I have things in my teeth, and now I need to like swish it with water, but I don't want to swish it with water because I don't want to drink right now, and I'm just being a brat. Like I just don't like eating when I'm not sitting at a table with like utensils, and I can decide to put vinegar in it if I want to. Like it's inconvenient, and then I think it's easy to ignore it. Like when I'm busy, I can hold my pee, so I will type of thing. And I think I treat it the same way with food.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. How's your energy feel when you're on like bike rides and things like that? Does it feel pretty good?
I think it's okay, but the thing I don't know is whether it could be better.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like it's fine. Like I don't have a comparison, but it probably could be better. I think so like my husband is here, like right here, and it's like he's being honest with what I'm saying.
What's his face say?
A lot of things.
Oh wait, he's shaded out. Oh darn. Oh wait, hopefully it's the background thing.
Oh, hang on. Okay.
Oh wait, there we go. There we go. Hi.
We've tried a lot of things. I think tailwind works, and I really like your idea of multiple snacking options. I think that sounds great. But yeah, any advice you could have, because I'm always bugging her to eat every time I try to eat.
Yeah.
It's a chore, but it's so necessary, right? So yeah, any advice you have would be great.
Yeah, honestly, variety of stuff. Just like you're done now. I love it.
Yeah,
Thanks for your input.
To retrain my brain about that, because I just don't eat at all. I hate it.
Yeah, because for me, okay, so the funny story that you're bringing up is I'm actually getting adult orthodontics next week because I've never actually had an even bite in my life. Like I was supposed to have braces when I was a kid, but I didn't want to. Long story. So now at 42, I'm getting orthodontia, and of course I'm getting those clear things, right? Can't eat the clear things. So now I have an obstacle starting next week. I'm gonna have to freaking figure out. And it's kind of the same boat, the same situation, where now I have to take out these things and I have to eat something, but now I'm actually not supposed to put my trays back in because I can run a risk of actually developing cavities quicker because I'm basically sealing the sugar against my teeth enamel. So now I'm having to think about it. So literally I'm bringing a toothbrush. I'm going to have a travel toothbrush that I'm at least going to rinse with water. I don't know if that's what you're going to need. I doubt that's what you're going to need, Pia. But what I would think, like, because I'm having to think about this too, is trying to have something that's maybe a little bit more whole foods oriented. So I'm real big on Durabites is really good. He makes them all with simple ingredients, no preservatives actually. So they don't really last very long. They only last a few months. But Durabites, I really like them. They're usually easy to chew. They don't get hard when it's cold, and they don't get gross when it's warm out. It's literally the only snack other than my pancakes that I've found that works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Full disclosure, I do know the owner, Brian. Like I've befriended him over the past few years, and I do some writing for him. But the only reason I do that is because I believe in his product. I get paid nothing for that. He doesn't pay me for the writing that I do. It's more like a bartering thing, right? But that's how much I believe in it. The other thing too is, especially if you like rice or noodles or things like that.
I do. I at that right now.
So some friends, I haven't tried this yet, Pia. You might be the experimenter.
Okay.
They have like bag of spaghetti or bag of noodles, or I think they call it boobs. I don't know what they came up with, but it's literally like they have a Ziploc with noodles. And I think some of them are now experimenting with those silicone camping containers. And they
Mhm.
literally like put them in their pocket or their pack, and they have like noodles. Now, of course, I wouldn't recommend having like meat or anything with them. But they'll have them like in a broth with and the noodles, and they literally pop open the lid and they'll slurp the noodles on the trail. I have not tried this yet, but it might
Mhm.
actually work for you, especially if that's your style of
Right.
eating.
I will try.
Yeah, it's weird,
What's it
but
called?
they swear by it. They make it. They make it themselves, and
Huh.
they call I think their nickname for them is boogs, which looks like boogers, but it's like bag of noodles, bag of nudes, or
Okay.
maybe they call them bee nudes or something. I don't know. It's something cute, but
Okay.
might be an option because honestly, what it boils down to is finding the foods that you enjoy eating that you're
Mhm.
not like, I have to eat this.
Yeah.
Kind of like I said earlier with the goo, like goo is like the last thing I want to eat most of the time because I think that sounds absolutely disgusting. But that's just me, but it works for other people. So maybe finding what works for you. Another thing that works, that might work, that I find works for me is I like savory. So I'm real big on umami flavor, like any type of savory. Like I love Parmesan cheese because again, umami, that umami
That's a
flavor
good
is like
idea.
it's my favorite flavor.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm real big on Scratch in Boulder has a cookbook called Feed Zone Portables.
Mhm.
And it is a recipe book of like a variety of rice cakes you can make yourself. And they're literally white rice, like kind of sashimi. I cannot talk tonight. What's wrong with me? Sushi style rice,
Okay.
right? And you're making that as like a little cake, little square, and you can season it however you want. You can put raspberries in there, is one of the recipes they have with dark chocolate and salt. Another one is like Parmesan cheese and ham. Like they have one with egg and rice and Parmesan. So some of them you're probably gonna have to eat sooner on your ride and not maybe 8 hours later, or you,
Mhm.
you risk food poisoning.
Mhm.
But just to let you know, like these are things that are very popular um, with that group, and I've seen great results with that. And I know some other clients have really loved uh, the Feed Zone portables. And it's kind of fun because you get to make it yourself. So you get to make
Okay.
it however you want. And they wrap it in wax paper. So they
Okay.
kind of fold it in wax paper. That way you can just have it. It's easy to eat because it's rice. At least it is for me. Even when it's like, when I'm not wanting to eat, rice is the easiest. That's the reason I'm eating it right now. It's the easiest to eat right now for me. So you want to find things that think about what you're eating right now, kind of like the first couple slides, like think about what you're eating right now, what you like and dislike, and then you can kind of go from there. Like, oh, maybe I can try the bag of noodles or the rice cakes,
Mhm.
and just kind of experiment with that because I think it's just going to be a matter of maybe not thinking about the bars that are out on the market, but what can you make that you actually like that's easy? Because I'm a lazy person when it comes to that. So I find the rice cakes or like noodles might be the easiest option. But yeah, Tailwind is also good. So is Scratch also has another item. Oh, why am I blanking on what it's called? It kind of, oh God, I'm not selling it here. I don't think anyone in the group works at Scratch right now. So when you mix it, it kind of looks like mucus. I don't know how to, that sounds, I know, not appealing at all,
Mhm.
but it's a slow release carbohydrate. And it's actually really nice because in a serving, I think it's about 400 calories. So if you don't like to eat, you might need to resort to something like that. That is something that you can have in an extra water bottle. Um, and you can mix it with some Scratch hydration mix if you want, but it's called like super fuel, I think, or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, but again, it's a slow release carbohydrate. It just kind of looks a little weird, but you need to mix it in advance because you need to give it time for it to actually disintegrate. But what's cool about it is it doesn't upset your stomach.
Okay.
I've yet to meet anyone that has experienced an upset stomach because of it. Because it's not necessarily a simple carbohydrate. It's like a slow release simple carbohydrate. So
Awesome.
there's
Thank you.
a lot of ideas. Yeah, I know that's kind of like a lot of information. If you need me to recap anything, I can do it in the
Yeah.
message.
No, I
But
think makes sense. Like just to plan for variety is what you
yeah.
said in the beginning
Oh
of
my
like
God, yeah.
variety, like what's kind of first and what's coming after, and just to find like a different thing that I like because I don't like what I'm eating.
hmm Yeah, mix it up. I get flavor fatigue, especially on my like 100-mile or longer rides. Like I get flavor fatigue. I get tired of eating the same thing. Like I love Endurabites, but I get tired of eating them, like bless you, Brian, but I just don't want to eat them, so I'll have Endurabites, I'll have stroopwafel, I'll have my pancakes. I usually do have some chews in there just because, like sometimes you just need some quick carbs. Um, God, I feel like I haven't biked in forever because of the snow. So now I'm trying to remember what I pack in my jersey pockets. I can't remember. Oh, then I have the mini stroop waffles. So they have the small stroop waffles from Honey Stinger now. Those are easy. So I get the big ones, the big stroop waffles, but then I also get the small ones because again, size matters, and like smaller bites like is going to be very important if you're not really wanting to chew on the bike. So just something to think about. Play
I
around
think
with
we need to look for something else I can, like a food that I'll look forward to.
Yep. Oh yeah, because I do look forward to my street waffles. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime, Pia. Hopefully it figures it out. Anyone else, Stacy? Anyone? All right. Well, I'm so glad everyone, I'm so glad you all got to join. Hopefully this is gonna be a long recording. Oh my goodness, I was not expecting an hour and a half. So thanks for hanging in there. But hopefully folks will watch this recording. They can always watch it on faster speed on YouTube. But I'm gonna have it loaded up in the next day. I'll definitely have it out on YouTube by tomorrow. I think it should be fine loading up by tomorrow. And then I'll send it out to everyone. But I just want to say thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you all for showing up and just, obviously being a part of the program, obviously, but then also just showing up and asking questions and showing interest in this. And obviously I can also break this into other portions. If you have specific questions about nutrition, I can break that into a separate presentation. And I can even do like a shorter video on Facebook or whatever, or for those who are not on Facebook, I'll do it on YouTube. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate you all. If you have any follow-up questions, you know where to get me. Email me or message me in the app and I'll get to you when I do, all right? Anyways, have a beautiful night. Enjoy the rest of your dinner, Pia, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. And I forgot about the recording.
Oh, yeah.
I was eating dinner. Like,
Oh
oops.
my God, are you kidding me? It's fine. Don't worry about it. Bye, everyone.
Bye.